Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and also one of, I don't want to say the hopefuls, but also someone who undeniably will be involved in the 2028 presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, recently launched his own podcast titled This is Gavin Newsom. The first episode came out last week, and the first guest was not Tim Walz. It wasn't Bernie Sanders. It wasn't even Kamala Harris or Nancy Pelosi. It was Charlie Kirk. Why the fuck are you, the Democratic governor of California, bringing a right-wing propagandist onto your show as the very first guest? Moreover, Gavin Newsom, why are you, the Democratic governor of California, not being combative with Charlie Kirk? The way I look at it is I'm totally down with right-wing content creators bringing left-wing creators. Well, Gavin Newsom isn't a creator, but I'm totally okay with those in right-wing media and left-wing media bringing each other onto their shows to have discussions about whatever the fuck. But I think the thing with me, and I'm very much in line with Emma Vigeland in this philosophy, that if I go onto a right-wing podcast or a show, I'm actively trying not to get invited back. I'm going to be combative. I'm going to be standoffish. I'm going to defend my opinions with logic, facts, as right-wingers love so much. I want them to despise me afterward. I may even be a little mean because, listen, a lot of these right-wingers are fucking assholes. Not just in terms of the way that they perpetuate propaganda and actively seek to destroy marginalized communities, but also in like their personal beliefs and behind closed doors. Like a lot of these guys are just fucking douchebags. Now, Gavin Newsom is a huge player in the Democratic Party. He is, of course, the governor of the largest state in the union, the governor of a state with an economy that is larger than pretty much virtually every other country on planet Earth. I think that if California were a standalone nation, its GDP would rank fifth. But he is one of those establishment Democrats who, for every one good thing that he does, he has multiple bad things that come out of it. So Gavin Newsom recently went to Skid Row and personally destroyed homeless encampments. He destroyed the tents that unhoused people set up to shelter themselves from the elements. If you remember, he did also raise the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour, but conveniently omitted Panera from that increase because one of his donors owns a couple dozen Panera Breads all throughout the state of California. You may also remember that Gavin Newsom was petitioning for the state of California to manufacture their own insulin, which of course never came to fruition. I'm pretty certain that it went to his desk and he vetoed it, but I can't recall the specifics of that. I do apologize. So he's a guy, in my estimation, that is exceptional when it comes to playing politics, but horrible when it comes to policy. He's a guy, he's a very sharp debater. He's a very well-spoken, a very articulate politician. He knows how to talk shit. He knows how to go back and forth with the opposition, which I think is a very valuable skill if you are a politician. But as I just mentioned, when it comes to policy, he's terrible. I like to think of my perfect Democrat politician, my perfect nominee for 2028 is Gavin Newsom's politics, or Gavin Newsom's ability to play politics, with the policy prescription of Andy Beshear or Tim Walz. Those two being my favorites to represent the Democratic Party in the 2028 presidential election. But let's go ahead. Let's discuss one piece from this. This garnered a lot of discussion because Gavin Newsom was in agreement with trans with trans women not being allowed to compete in women's sports. This was a sharp break from the Democratic Party's policy.
What's your thoughts? That's okay. Down to vulnerable communities is an issue of fairness. I completely agree. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. No, so let me step back, say completely fair on the issue of fairness. Like, frankly, I
overshot it.
There are not that many. We're talking about, I think, the NC2A years. Boy, did I saw how you guys were able to weaponize that issue at another level.
Not weaponize. That's
well, weaponize may be pejorative. You're right.
No, but Gavin. Okay, we're already off to a ripping start. This is exactly the point that I'm making. Do not concede to these evil, brain-dead nincompoops. This is weaponization. This is something that the Republican Party has historically done with marginalized communities. They demonize black people. They've demonized black people historically by saying that they're welfare queens and like they're mooching off of the social safety net. They talk about 1350 when it comes to immigrants. They say that all immigrants are murderers and rapists, even though the data says otherwise. And now when it comes to trans athletes, they're saying that, oh, it's unfair that they're going into all these sports and taking all of these scholarships and winning all of these medals. Meanwhile, as Gavin Newsom is going to mention, there's like a dozen trans athletes in college athletics. None of them are nearly as successful as conservatives say. They always hyperfixate on like the one trans woman that has a little bit of success in their respective sport, and they fucking run with it. And this is knowing that trans people, as Gavin Newsom will also mention, are more likely than any other group to kill themselves. And it's partly because of right-wing demons like Charlie Kirk contributing to the hatred of these people who just want to live their lives.
Highlight it in a way that, frankly, there are not that many. We're talking about, I think, the NC2A, what, 510,000? No, but I just didn't realize.
It's 890 medals and trophies that we know of in the last 5 years. That's a lot.
No, so let me step back, say completely fair on the issue of fairness. I completely agree. So that's easy to call out. That's a fucking
lie, dude. 890 medals? What the fuck are you saying, Charlie? You're just blatantly lying to the sitting governor of California. Are you fucking mental? 890 medals, a number that has been disputed by multiple fact-checking organizations. These people are so fucking shameless. They propagandize people with no fucking basis of reality. I do propaganda. I'm not unaware of that. But when I do propaganda, I bring facts and data to the equation. Oh, I want single-payer healthcare, Medicare for all? Yeah, because 37,000 people die every year because they don't have access to health insurance. Like, that is actual propaganda. That's actual propaganda. This is just fucking lying.
So that there's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency that I think, is inherent in you, but not always expressed on the issue?
No, I get it.
At the same time, deal with the unfairness.
So you asked a good faith question, like how do we Democrats get out of the wilderness?
Yeah.
This one is an 80-20 issue. New York Times poll, right? That's
no,
not
I agree with you. We're getting
part.
crushed on.
Crushed. And you have an opportunity in the state to be like, look, I have a heart for A.B. Hernandez. I have a heart for the San Jose volleyball player.
Yeah.
Let's give them
Can we just
compassion.
also allude to the fact that I think it was Pew Research ran a poll on this of issues that voters held closest to them. Trans issues were at the fucking bottom. People do not care about trans people. And I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying this in that most people are agnostic towards whether someone wants to be trans. Most people will just allow these folks to live. Most people, despite what you may see online, have no interest in what trans people are doing and want them to lead happy, fulfilling lives.
It's not fair is just for like a entire woman's sports.
I agree. By the way, I agree.
What the fuck are you agreeing to? Oh my God, dude, he's so spineless. He's so dumb. Holy shit. The whole idea. Let's entertain this argument, right? Let's entertain this argument that trans women have inherent biological advantages over cisgendered women. Are these two entirely unaware of the fact that athletics is based on someone being advantaged over their opposition? Do you think that LeBron does not have physical advantages? Do you think that Serena Williams does not have physical advantages? Do you not think that Victor Wembanyama has physical advantages? Yeah, dude, that's why they're great. But it's also because they've worked tirelessly to not only capitalize, they've worked tirelessly to capitalize on those physical advantages. Cisgendered men and cisgendered women have biological advantages. There are cisgendered women that have high testosterone. There was an Olympic sprinter or an Olympic long distance runner who was banned by the IOC. A cisgendered woman was banned because her testosterone was too high. Imagine if Brittany Griner or Brianna Stewart got banned from the WNBA because they were too tall. This is how fucking stupid the fairness argument is. Now, they always cherry pick and they'll be like, oh, well, what if you had this in combat sports? Hello? Weight classes exist. There are, like, do you think that I'm 165 pounds. Do you think that I would fucking step in the ring with Derek Lewis? Yeah, that's a fucking physical advantage that he has, which is why smaller fighters and smaller wrestlers can only fight in their weight class unless they're willing to gain weight. The whole fairness argument is so fucking flimsy. It's paper thin. And I don't understand how more people just don't retort with that.
And it's interesting. I stress tested this, Charlie. I was wondering, I said, in California, and I've been a leader in the LGBTQ space, as you know, back in 2004, was marrying same-sex couples. And I know we have different opinion on marriage equality.
This is what I'm talking about, too. Like, Gavin Newsom went against the federal government, and he said, I'm going to marry these same-sex couples. Come fucking arrest me. And now, 20 years later, he is siding with a conservative freakazoid on the issue on the quote-unquote issue of trans women in women's sports. The dozen collegiate athletes that are trans women competing in women's sports.
At this for years and years. I take a backseat to no one. But I was actually on the issue of sports, which in the last few years has just exploded.
Oh my God.
Trying to understand the 10 athletes in the NC2A, 510,000 athletes, but 10 athletes. And but how profound. And even my own friend cohort, people saying, the hell is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you calling this out? When did this happen? So in 2014, years before I was governor,
mm-hmm.
there was a law established the legal principles that allow trans athletes in women's sports. But the issue of fairness is completely legit. So I completely align with you. And we've got to own that. We've got to acknowledge it. I don't say that through the prism of politics because you disagree with same-sex marriage on principle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not, and by the way, I value the fact that you're not trying to walk away from that principle because electorally,
I'm in the minority of that.
Yeah, in the minority. And I don't want to walk away from this principle because it's electoral, but it is an issue of fairness. And I think Democrats have lost that.
I think that I wish that we would have done this podcast last week.
Last week?
Well, because the U.S. Senate just every Democrat voted against that bill. And I'm just telling you, like, again, I'm not one to give
because
Governor
it's the
Newsom
right
advice.
thing to
you
do.
Guys are giving
oh
us
my
an
God, dude. This is the most fucking brain-broken conversation to have right now. These guys are glazing each other over how much they hate trans athletes. Like, they're not even trying to look at it from the perspective of athletes. They're just looking at it from their transphobia.
20 issue that is just permeating the country. It is such an affront to our senses. And you look at these videos, Governor, because it's not just that it's, okay, you read an article about it, but these young men that are in these sports, they're throwing around girls, and it is an issue of fairness, but it goes to a broader arch narrative, which is important.
No, and this, I want to hear this.
Which is this, that the Democrats, you guys will tend to view an incident through an oppressor-oppressed lens.
Yeah.
It's your training. It comes from college. It comes from... And we, as conservatives, tend to view things through right or wrong or just or unjust.
Oh my God. Charlie Kirk is just a fucking idiot. To examine instances from the oppressor, from the view of the oppressed versus the oppressor, is to just examine things through a historical lens. Colonization. The colonization of North and South America. Are you gonna look at that from right and wrong, or oppressed versus oppressee? Well, you can also look at it right and wrong, obviously, but also the Crusades, slavery, Jim Crow, the gay rights, trans rights. To not acknowledge that is to just be ahistorical. Although I'm not necessarily surprised. Conservatives do not like history because, unfortunately, history has a liberal slant to it. So they're like, oh, right and wrong. But it's also the fact that these people have a fundamental, they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what right and wrong is. It's only right and wrong to them. It's not objective right and wrong. It's right and wrong. Even when the Bible, these Bible-thumping Christians, and I don't know if Charlie Kirk is a Bible-thumping Christian, but I do know that on the right, a lot of these religious zealots will use the Bible as the basis for their justification of hating things or not, even though the Bible is kind of left-wing a little bit. There's, passages about a rich person having a harder time getting into heaven than the camel getting through the eye of a needle. Jesus said, be kind to your neighbor. He said, be kind to immigrants. Jesus was, like, by modern estimations, like a socialist, It's just, this is a horrible justification for this.
And the country is going far more in our direction and away from your direction, because the problem with oppressor oppressed is eventually you run out of oppressors and you start creating them out of thin air.
Yeah.
And you start trying to say, well, these people must be blamed for all of our problems, and that's where you get a lot of the, let's just say for example, there's a Wall Street Journal editorial like, when will the white men shut up or stop complaining? That does no.
This is, if Gavin Newsom were actually trying to have a standoffish conversation, you can say two things here. One, the country is not overwhelmingly becoming right-wing. That's just a fucking lie. Donald Trump won by 1.5 percentage points, which was one of the slimmest margins of victory in modern electoral politics. Additionally, the idea that you run out of oppressors is just fucking dumb. Conservatives play the blame game all the time, except they blame trans people and immigrants for why the country is experiencing a downward spiral, when the reality is the fact that Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, all of these rich assholes are becoming exceedingly wealthy. The billionaires are the reason why your life sucks. It's not someone's abuela from Honduras. It's not the one trans person that exists in your community. It is the billionaires. It is the wealthy elite. Of course, Gavin Newsom, and I'm not naive to this, he's not going to bring this up because he is part of that. He is part of that class. He is a corporate Democrat through and through. His donors would execute him in Minecraft. I'm not trying to get banned anywhere. If he started speaking out against them.
It's no good for anybody, right?
No.
So what I'm getting at though is it's a worldview difference, right? And so
that's why the issue is so much more powerful.
Of course it is, because but it's also pattern recognition.
Yeah.
It's pattern recognition of a Democrat Party that post 2020 decided to go all in. We call it woke. You might call it, justice or whatever it is, but it's so outside of what we would consider traditional American norms and customs.
Is this a fucking ad?
A Democrat strategist would say, "Oh,
what the fuck was that?" Dude, I'm so confused. Hang on.
Charlie, you're weaponized." Pattern recognition.
Yeah.
It's pattern recognition of a Democrat Party that post 2020 decided to go all in. We call it woke. You might call it, justice or whatever it is.
This is what I also don't understand is why conservatives run with this point. Because in 2020, the woke Democrats beat the fucking brakes off the Republican Party. Joe Biden, woke Joe Biden, the CEO of DEI, Joe Biden, became president by a margin of like 6 or 7 percentage points, I think. There was like a 7 million vote difference. This doesn't hold up logically. Because if you're going to interpret that data, are you going to think that like, oh shit, maybe people are woke. Maybe people like wokeness. Maybe people enjoy fairness amongst everybody. Oh my God, I got so fucking thrown off by that.
But it's so outside of what we would consider traditional American norms and customs.
What the fuck? Dude, I'm like, what is going on? The Democrats, like, okay, this is fucking stupid. Like,
the Democrat strategist would say, "Oh, Charlie, you're weaponizing stuff." Not you, but like that's a typical thing.
I would say that.
But
I'm not a Democratic strategist because I'm fucking a little bit smarter than they are. But yeah, conservatives have historically weaponized culture war issues because their actual policy prescription is fucking trash. They don't want to hire minimum wage. They don't want universal child care. They don't want to reform the healthcare system. They don't want to take the cap off of Social Security. They don't want to put higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Those policies are simply not winning policies. Every poll shows it. Every poll shows that overwhelmingly progressive policy wins. And fuck the polls even. If we can go to Missouri. They had a ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage to $15, and it overwhelmingly voted. In Florida, I think it was, I can't remember if it was minimum wage or to legalize marijuana, and they voted for it. There was a majority that voted for that direct ballot initiative. But of course, in Florida, you need a super majority. So you needed 60% of the vote as opposed to like 57 or whatever it got. When we go to Kansas, deep red Kansas, they overwhelmingly voted to legalize abortion. These policies, left-wing, liberal, whatever you want to call it, they are overwhelmingly popular with the people. And what you have here are two wealthy, elite, you have two members of the 1% of the political elite talking about fucking nonsense.
Effective ad of this election cycle, the most effective ad. You know what it is?
Yeah, and devastating. Trump's for you, she's for they, them.
And
devastating.
Devastating. And let's talk
and she didn't even react to it, which was even more.
And let's talk about why it was devastating. Number one, it was the trans issue that was just monopolizing.
And this was even more challenging because there's issues of people that are incarcerated
and illegal.
And illegal incarcerated individuals getting taxpayer-funded
Yes, and
gender reassignment surgeries.
and
That
If
is a
I
90-10,
listened to
not
this,
an 80.
like if I woke up from a coma and I didn't know who Gavin Newsom was, and I didn't know that he was almost Donald Trump's son-in-law, I would think that he's just a Republican. Just, it's not even just the content of the conversation, because that's part of it, but it's also the language in which people use. Gavin Newsom not pushing back when Charlie Kirk calls immigrants illegal is right wing. They're undocumented. There is no such thing as an illegal immigrant. You are either documented or you're not. That's fucking bullshit framing.
80,
right,
20.
and then she's like
Yes.
enthusiastically defending it, bragging,
Yeah.
being like, "I'm all for this. I'm all for this."
And then you had the video that was a validator. Brutal.
Yeah, and so
Tens of millions of brutal. And then the targeted focus from the Trump campaign, next level.
and then
focusing
Charlemagne
on
comes out on Breakfast Club, is like, "This is insane," and they ran it on NFL football.
Brilliant.
Yes, and so you're trying to reach men.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's a brilliant campaign commercial. It was brutal. It was devastating.
It doesn't require.
By the way, we were running around just for the what the hell it's worth for you. She was AG at the time. She was addressing the issue of a legal settlement. The courts were intervening
still
on this
bragging.
topic. But she had the video where in the video she was obviously expressed support. And so 100%
she was
right.
being a cheerleader for a very unpopular thing.
It was
and
it
again,
was a great ad. And I don't say that lightly.
But this is important
in political annals.
And I want to make
Brutal.
sure it's not just that this was like the Willie Horton ad of the 2024.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a Lee Atwater brilliance. It's that it reflected truth that the voters felt.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
No.
Voters,
This is why Democrats are fucking losers. They're never going to win anything ever again if the ghouls like Gavin Newsom are allowed to lead the party. If trans people, if the existence of trans people is such a problem with the general electorate, why is Andy Beshear the governor of Kentucky? Why is Andy Beshear the governor, the Democratic governor of one of the reddest states in the country? Why is Andy Beshear the Democratic governor of one of the reddest states in the country on record supporting his trans constituents? Because people don't care. The majority of people are agnostic towards whether or not people are trans. A trans person, the existence of a trans person has less of an impact on their life than the inflated cost of living. Those are the issues that care. Democrats and Republicans are uniparty in the sense that the majority of them, the majority of Democrats and the entirety of the Republican Party are incapable of having a conversation on real issues that actually impact people. Kamala Harris didn't lose this election because she's for they, them. She lost this election because she was unwilling to break from Joe Biden on the genocide in Gaza. She was unwilling to call for a ceasefire. She was unwilling to say that she would stop the transfer of arms and money to Benjamin Netanyahu. She was unwilling to break from Joe Biden, who behind closed doors had the same ethnic cleansing plan that Donald Trump has right now. That's why she lost. She didn't lose because she's for they, them. She didn't lose because of trans people in any way, shape, or form. She didn't lose because she was woke. She lost because she failed to focus on one of the most prominent issues in America today.
felt as if their country was slipping away.
Yeah.
Now, the Democrats have a choice. You could say to those people, you're racist, you're Nazis, you're fascists, you're terrible. Or you can listen and then be like, why is it that a steel worker in Pittsburgh who's voted Democrat his entire life is voting for Trump despite all of, the stuff that's been thrown at him?
Yeah, and all the rhetoric that he's thrown at us.
Yes,
in that context.
But it's a pattern, and the trans thing is just one of those things. But the second element was also what we saw under Joe Biden was, if you came to the southern border from any country and you spoke the magic words, you could go to any city you're choosing, right? CBP One border app, and
an objectively great thing. Charlie Kirk, you're just a racist, straight up. The CBP One app allowed for immigrants to schedule meetings or appointments with judges and caseworkers to have a case for TPS to be made for them. it allowed for more people to go on that pathway to citizenship. That is an objectively good thing. Despite the fact that Joe Biden put up Wilt Chamberlain numbers when it came to deportations. I can't listen to any more of this conversation. I'm going to lose my fucking mind. Because these guys are two cheeks of the same ass, except one of them is just more hateful than the other. In the aftermath of this, Charlie Kirk took to his Twitter page and said, how fucking old am I? Oh my God. Politico has not one, not two, but 5 reporters covering the fallout of Gavin Newsom's comments about men and women's sports during my interview with him. Lori Lightfoot says he's disgusting. Sacramento is in an uproar. Democrats all over the country are saying that this issue is a litmus test for the party going forward. Democrats cannot simply handle taking an L in the culture war. I hate this motherfucker because you are playing with people's lives here. You are boiling down the existence of these people to being a fucking culture war topic. How fucking sick are you? How disgusting are you? This is not a culture war topic, you fucking asshole. These are people's lives. These are people who kill themselves at the highest, at the largest rate of any group. And you're boiling this down to a fucking culture war. You're such a sick and twisted motherfucker. You are so despicable. The fact that you can have such disregard for your fellow American is so fucking sickening. Him and Gavin Newsom should be deeply ashamed of themselves, but they're not, because this society has lost any semblance of shame. The fact that you can just go out and hate the existence of someone, of a marginalized group that is literally trying to be written out of existence, is so sick. And don't come at me with this fucking bullshit that, oh, Republicans aren't actually trying to eradicate trans people. They just believe in these rigid gender norms. You have people like Matt Walsh who straight up says that trans people should not exist. You also have a fundamental misunderstanding of biology and how sex and gender is a spectrum. It's not rigid. You're just afraid that your worldview is potentially being altered. Additionally, we have this article courtesy of the Houston Chronicle. Houston lawmaker proposes a bill that could charge transgender Texans with fraud. And you're going to sit here and tell me that they're not trying to legislate these people out of existence? Wake the fuck up, man. Last year, the state of Texas barred trans residents from changing their sex on state-issued driver's licenses and birth certificates to match their gender identity. The same shit that the Trump administration did. Now, a Houston area lawmaker wants to make that mismatch a crime punishable by prison time. Prison time. State Representative Tom Oliverson filed a bill Wednesday that would amend the Texas Penal Code to create a new form of fraud, gender identity fraud. These sexless, brainless demons are going out of their way to implement new crimes expressly targeted at trans people. Sit with that. Gender identity fraud. Gender identity fraud. A person would commit, quote unquote, gender identity fraud by, quote, identifying the person's biological sex as the opposite of the biological sex assigned to them at birth. Committing gender identity fraud under the proposal would be a state jail felony, the lowest level of felony in Texas. A person found guilty would be subject to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. If gender dysphoria is such an issue, why is every medical and doctoral institution in agreement on the fact that this is a legitimate disorder that requires medical care, not just physical, but mental as well? Because this is a real thing. You can't just draft legislation and expect this to go away. You're literally going to kill people. You're going to kill people. Tom Oliverson, if this bill passes, you will have blood on your hands. I hope you're able to reckon with that. House Bill 3817 would add gender identity fraud to the list of fraudulent crimes covered under the Texas Penal Code's subchapter D, which includes crimes like deceptive business practices, commercial bribery, and identity fraud. Oliverson's office did not respond to a request for comment because he's a fucking loser. He can't even stand behind the legislation that he drafted because he's a demon. Oliverson's proposal faces an uphill climb to become law as the 3,817th bill filed during the 2025 legislative season. The bill is a low priority in the chamber. It also has no co-sponsors and has yet been scheduled for a committee hearing. Callie Butcher, founder of Butcher Legal Group, a Dallas law firm that advocates for and serves the LGBTQ community, said that while Oliverson's bill faces slim odds of passing, it's in line with other bills that would restrict transgender people's freedom of expression. It's not just, it doesn't matter if this bill has no chance of passing. This is going to embolden other representatives in other states to try the same thing. It's not a single isolated instance. This will snowball. To other deep red states. Quote, "This is the kind of bill that keeps me up at night," Butcher said. "This fits right along with the agenda that we've been seeing pushed for the past several sessions, specifically around policing of people's gender and how they're able to identify themselves on documents and in sports leagues." Butcher, who was previously the president of the Dallas LGBT Bar Association, said that HB 3817's language is in line with the rhetoric Republicans use to cast transgender identity as deceptive. Quote, "The rhetoric we've been seeing used over the last 3 years is this idea that trans people are somehow deceiving or misrepresenting their identity and using it for advantage. This bill pulls at that a little bit, and that's what scares me. It's a medical condition. You go to your physician, you see a psychiatrist, and they treat you for gender dysphoria, whether that be going on puberty blockers, whether that be actually undergoing surgeries once you're a legal adult. This isn't like to pin this as deceptive or fraudulent. It's just victim blaming. Like what benefit would come of someone faking their of someone pretending to be trans? It's literally just it's a fantasy cooked up in the minds of Republicans. Upon taking office, President Donald Trump signed an executive order banning transgender troops from serving in the military. The order, which followed another order asserting that the federal government will only recognize two sexes, male and female, uses sweeping language to declare that being transgender, quote, conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle. The Trump administration was so horny to get this bill together that they accidentally made it so that everybody was female. They fucked up the chromosomes in the text and thereby rendered everybody female. The order also asserts that trans identity, quote, is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member. In early 2024, Florida barred transgender residents from changing the sex on their state driver's license, a move that Texas made later that summer. But the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles went one step further, writing in a memo that misrepresenting one's gender understood as sex on a driver's license constitutes fraud. Gender and sex are not the same, guys. I don't know how to tell you this. You can be a cisgendered man and be feminine or perceived as more feminine or perceived as more masculine. It's a spectrum. It's not rigid. And even gender, the associations we have with the male and female gender have changed over time. 100 years ago, or maybe even sooner than that, newborn boys used to be associated with the color pink, and newborn girls used to be associated with the color blue. Those have since flipped. It's a spectrum, guys. I don't know like what more convincing you need. The Florida DHSMV did not clarify whether trans residents who had already changed their driver's license at the time of the policy change were committing fraud, and no Florida resident has been charged with any crime under the new policy. However, the state did cancel the license of non-binary activist James Rose, after right-wing social media account Libs of TikTok posted a video in which Rose described a loophole they used to change their sex on their license from male to female. Libs of TikTok is a fucking cretin. While the House proposal makes no mention of identifying documents, Butcher said that, like in Florida, she worries that trans people who have changed one but not all of their documents could face criminal charges when seeking housing, employment, or medical care. She cited other bills, like ones that enshrine strict definitions of male and female into law and restrict sex changes on state-issued documents as ways that Oliverson's bill could fit into a larger framework of criminalizing trans identity. Quote, "We have a lot of people who have only been able to update some of their documents before laws have changed," Butcher said. "When your identifying documents don't match what your biological sex was at birth, how are you supposed to prove you are you?" Conservatives are not coming at this from any logical point of view. They're coming at this straight from their hatred of trans people. They don't care. They simply don't care. They would rather not have these people exist than to accommodate them. And it is the smallest of small minorities in the country. It's like less than 1% of people are trans. It might be at the highest end 1%. Oliverson's bill is one of 58 pieces of legislation the Cyprus representative has filed this session, including one that recognizes January 29th as Shen Yun Day at the Texas Capitol, and another that would make the abortion drug mifepristone a controlled substance. What the fuck is Shen Yun Day? I know what Shen Yun is. I'm unaware of this guy's immense fucking. I don't even know what this is. Like, oh my god. Okay, I'm getting into the weeds. He had already established himself as an opponent of transgender rights. During the 2023 legislative session, Oliverson was the key sponsor of Senate Bill 14, a bill that banned hormone therapy and puberty blockers for trans youth in Texas, and was ultimately upheld by the state Supreme Court in an 8-1 decision. House Bill 3817 is yet another piece of legislation targeting queer and transgender Texans. Since bill filing opened in the winter of 2024, more than 50 pieces of legislation have been filed to curtail the rights of transgender Texans, including one that would expand SB 14 to ban gender-affirming care for adults as well as children. Gender-affirming care is more than just puberty blockers and hormones. Breast augmentations are gender-affirming care. Getting a hair transplant is gender-affirming care. Getting testosterone treatment, if you're an adult male, is gender-affirming care. They don't understand anything. They're so fucking dumb. They cannot compartmentalize the nuance here. And here's the thing, guys. Puberty blockers and hormones are reversible. And there are no minors getting bottom surgery. That's farcical. That's farcical. Conservatives bring that point up all the time. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not a thing. Sadie Hernandez, a spokesperson for the Transgender Education Network of Texas, said in a statement that while these pieces of legislation are alarming for LGBTQ plus Texans, she stressed that many of the anti-LGBTQ plus bills filed each session never pass and that people should stay vigilant. Quote, "Bills like this are likely to cause distress and anxiety in the trans community, especially now that we are facing threats at all levels of government," Hernandez said. "We are monitoring all bills relating to trans rights and will keep the community updated with bills that are at the alarming part of the legislative process. We do not want trans and gender expansive Texans to be exhausted before it's time to hit the ground running at the Capitol." I'm going to close this segment with one thing. To all of the transgender listeners out there, to all of the non-binary listeners out there, I will fight for your representation until the day I die. I do not believe that any marginalized group should be targeted in any way. This includes Black Americans, this includes brown Americans and immigrants trying to come into this country and make a better life for themselves. And this extends to everybody in the LGBTQ plus community. All I hope for you guys is that good wins and that the hateful attitude coming from the Republican Party is defeated, because you folks deserve nothing more than to live happy, fulfilling lives. And I will use this platform, however big, however small it may be, to advocate for that.